from time to time. This is probably my favorite, besides the prodigal son. And some people argue that the prodigal son wasn't actually a parable; it was actually an account, a recounting of something. But the parable of the sower is found in multiple gospels, which is good for us as studiers because we get different vantage points. You get somebody who goes to a concert or goes to a parade, and you ask them, what they saw or what stood out to them, and you'll get different opinions because they all saw the same event from different vantage points. Mark, Matthew, Luke, John all saw the same Jesus, saw the same gospel played out in front of them, and then the Spirit of God moved upon them to record that which was most pertinent, that which impressed them, that which was vital to the growth and the proliferation of the church body. And so when you see a message repeated in the Gospels, like the parable of the sower, take note, pay attention. If it was enough for Mark, the first writer of the Gospel, to jot this down, and then Matthew to go, yeah, I need to talk about that too, and John or Luke to be like, I want to talk about that as well. Like there's still some more. We got to talk about this some more. That means it's pretty important. Okay, it's already important. It's the word of God, but now we've just increased the importance. So in Mark chapter 4, verse 1, it says, again, he, that's Jesus, began to teach beside the sea. And a very large crowd gathered about him so that he got into a boat and sat in it on the sea. And the whole crowd was beside the sea on the land. Now I've heard that this creates like an echo or an amphitheater type effect. I don't know how true that is. It may just be that Jesus needed to get out further away so more people could see and hear him. I have no doubt that when Jesus spoke, he could command a room. I don't think he had a big booming voice that's why you listened to him. I think you listened because you understood he was the Son of God and he was speaking the words of truth, as Peter would say later. But that's why he's doing the whole boat thing. And he was teaching them many things in parables. And in his teaching, he said to them, listen, behold, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seed fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured it. Other seed fell on rocky ground where it did not have much soil, and immediately it sprang up, since it had no depth of soil. And when the sun rose, it was scorched, and since it had no root in it, it withered away. Other seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no grain. And other seeds fell into good soil and produced grain, growing up and increasing and yielding 30-fold and 60-fold and 100-fold. And he said, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. I like to repeat that last verse a lot when I'm praying for you guys on a Sunday morning or when I'm getting ready to preach, because it's something Jesus said a lot. And I think there's no better thing that a preacher can say than the words of Jesus. Like, if there's anything that carries weight in this world, it's the word of God, not the preacher's own voice or thoughts or opinions and things like that. Jesus said over and over again, he who has ears to hear, let him hear it. It comes up later in the book of Revelation. It's this idea of something's being said here. Pay attention. Don't just hear what's being said. Like, be attentive to the words that are being spoken. Jesus started by saying what? Listen, right? Now, there's a crowd around him. They've come for the purpose of listening to him. And Jesus stops to say, listen. Okay? Jesus is not redundant. Jesus is not silly. Jesus is not trying to fill time or dead air. When he says to listen, when he tells us, he who has ears to hear, let him hear, he's telling us, look, pay attention to what I'm about to say. This is pretty important. Okay? Now, we could argue all of the gospel is important. All of the Bible is important. Yes, absolutely. This is not to say this is more important. What I'm saying to you is that now, eternally, and in this moment today, that we are to allow our ears to perk up, to really pay attention to what Jesus is about to say. He gives this parable of the sower, and he says that a sower went out to sow seed. Okay? And he threw seed on 4 different types of soil that Jesus describes. There's a path, there's a rocky soil, there's a thorn-filled or a weed-filled soil, and then a good soil. And the good soil produces 30, 60, and 100-fold. Last year, we tried our hand at gardening for real for the first time, and there's there's a joy in planting one seed and getting multiple tomatoes, or planting one plant and getting a harvest full of tomatoes, watching it grow and be more than it was when you started. It's a fulfilling, joyful experience. And Jesus said that this sower, he sowed this seed on these 4 different soils, and each one, except for the good soil, of course, had some issues, some problems that prevented the seed from growing. The first one was the hard path. It was the place that the ground had been walked over so much it was compacted and almost smooth. It was just a place where cattle and people and animals walked so frequently that there was a rut, and nothing could penetrate that. Water would puddle up in it because it couldn't sink in. If you've ever been on a nature trail, right? I'm very outdoorsy, so I see a lot of nature trails. That's a joke. I was hoping my wife would laugh at that. But you go on a path or a trail and you see where everybody goes. The rocks are smoother, the ground's compacted. It's very easy to walk there because so many people have walked there. Listen, when that becomes the issue with the soil, that becomes the easiest route to take. We'll talk about why that's important in just a moment. The second one was ground that was very stony, but had some dirt in it. So enough for the seeds to get in there and to start to grow and spring up really fast. But plants, some plants more than others, but plants for the most part, they need room to grow. They need a place to shoot their roots out and establish themselves, right? And when there's rocks everywhere, you can't do that. The thorny one, probably the most self-explanatory one, is the thorns and the weeds. When weeds grow up around your plants, they take all the nutrients out of the ground. They take all the attention. And your good plant that you want to plant can't thrive because all the nutrients and sunlight and area that plant needs to grow is being taken up by the stuff you don't want: the thorns, the thistles, the briars. And then, of course, you have the good soil. The good soil being rich and fertile and just it smells that earthy, good smell of like, oh, this is gonna be good soil. And when you plant it, it bears 30, 60, and 100-fold. Jesus is giving this parable to teach us something. And it's not a radical idea. This is not, sometimes when pastors and preachers, myself included, we try to explain something, we'll go to the hermeneutical explanation, and that's just a big Latin word for like explaining. And I don't even know exactly what that word means, but I'm throwing it out there because it sounds important. We use big words. We define the Greek or the Hebrew or the Aramaic, or we come with the Latin and we bring this translation and things like that. And sometimes that's necessary, and I really enjoy that. It's really good. It's good to know when someone's teaching you that they know those things and come at it from a place of research and study and prayer. But often, especially with the parables of Jesus, it's very point blank. It's very deep, but it's very easy to see. It's very easy to understand and to grasp onto. But the disciples, after being told to listen, couldn't. We don't get this teaching, Jesus. And Jesus